Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're cracking open a single source. It's excerpts from a sermon called "When the Wind Speaks: Living by the Spirit."
Right. And this sermon really takes a close look at the Holy Spirit, using that really potent metaphor of wind, trying to help us grasp its nature, how it works.
Yeah, and it uses some key scripture moments, especially Pentecost Sunday. Acts chapter 2, the Spirit showing up like a rushing wind.
But it's not just history, is it? The sermon argues it's about how we live now.
Exactly, a present reality. And it connects it back even further, doesn't it, to Jesus' promise.
Yeah, in John 14, before Pentecost happened, like he was setting the stage for this presence that was coming.
Okay, so let's start there with that core idea, the Spirit as wind. What's so compelling about that image, according to the source?
Well, think about actual wind. You don't see it, do you?
No, never.
But you absolutely see what it does. The effects. Leaves moving, branches swaying.
Clouds moving, their shadows.
Yeah. You know it's there, and the sermon says, well, that's kind of like the Spirit. Invisible, maybe, but known through its actions, through what it touches, what it moves.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's about recognizing the impact.
Precisely. And it points right to John 14, where Jesus promises another companion, the Spirit of truth.
Right, and he says the world doesn't see or recognize this Spirit.
But believers will, because, as Jesus puts it, he lives with you and will be in you.
That word companion, the sermon mentions paraclete.
Yes, meaning one who comes alongside.
Yeah.
For courage, for support. It really pushes against the idea of the Spirit being just, an abstract concept.
It sounds much more immediate, more vital.
It is. The source uses terms like breath, wind, life itself. It's presented as something essential, tangible in its effects, even if you can't, physically grab it.
And it ties this breath idea to some huge moments, like Jesus breathing on the disciples after the resurrection.
Right. John chapter 20, the sermon calls it a divine exhale, a holy wind. Really evocative language.
Wow. And even further back to Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis 2.7. God breathing life's breath into the first human, animating the dust. The sermon draws a direct line saying the Spirit is that life-giving force, what animates us.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Spirit as wind, as breath, known by its effects, giving life. Where does the sermon go next? It talks about specific ways the Spirit works.
Exactly. It lays out what it calls 5 movements or actions of the Spirit based on that John 14 passage mainly. It's like, okay, what do these effects actually look like in practice?
Let's dig into those. What's the first movement?
The first one is, the Spirit is a gift for everyone who believes.
So accessibility, not exclusive.
Right. The sermon's really clear here. It's not just for, the pastors, the prophets, the quote-unquote super spiritual people.
It links this to loving Jesus and keeping his commandments from John 14.15, which comes right before the promise.
Yes. So it's framed as a promise for the faithful, not some prize you get for, praying harder or singing louder than everyone else.
It's about relationship, not performance.
Exactly. It's available. For you, for me, for anyone who turns towards Jesus.
Okay, that's clear. Availability, not achievement. What's the second movement?
Number 2 focuses on presence. The Spirit dwells with us and in us.
That's from John 14.17 again.
Yeah.
He lives with you and will be in you.
Right. And the sermon stresses this isn't like a temporary visit. The Spirit, it says, moves in and makes a home.
Makes a home. So permanence. Or at least intended permanence.
Yeah, and crucially, it's not just in you, personally, but among you, in the community.
So both individual and collective.
Definitely. The sermon makes a point to distinguish the gifts of the Spirit, like prophecy, healing, things like that, from the presence of the Spirit itself.
And the presence is the main thing.
That's the argument. The presence is foundational. It's what holds people together, especially, when things get tough.
It mentions the specific church context, Sunnyvale UMC, hoping their work reflects the Spirit leading when they meet, worship, serve.
Yeah, the presence shapes everything they do.
Okay, so a gift for everyone and an indwelling presence. What's number 3?
Movement 3. The Spirit reminds us of Jesus.
Memory. How does that work?
Well, we all know memory is powerful, right? But the sermon suggests the Spirit helps us remember Jesus in a specific way, spiritually, viscerally, personally. deeper than just recalling facts.
This connects to John 14.26, doesn't it? The Spirit will teach you everything and will remind you.
Everything I told you. Exactly. And there's this lovely little story in the sermon.
Oh, yeah.
About a church member just doing the dishes, and suddenly a line from an old hymn pops into her head, brings tears to her eyes.
Why? Just the nostalgia.
Not just that, she felt in that moment profoundly remembered, held. And the sermon presents that feeling, that connection as the Spirit's work, using that memory to remind her of Jesus' presence.
That's quite beautiful. It makes memory feel active, sacred almost.
Right. And the sermon talks about how the church community itself creates these good memories. Potlucks, baptisms, songs, holding hands, all that stuff. And the Spirit uses those shared experiences. They become the fabric of our faith.
The fabric of faith. I like that. Okay, so reminding. What's the fourth movement?
Fourth is empowerment. The Spirit empowers us.
Power. Like what kind of power are we talking about here? Superpowers.
No, not quite superpowers. The sermon is careful to clarify. It's more about resilience, power that shows up when life is genuinely hard.
Can you give an example from the source?
Sure. It talks about the strength to just get out of bed when you're deep in grief, or finding the ability to forgive someone who's hurt you deeply.
Things that feel almost impossible sometimes.
Exactly. Or even speaking truth in love when your voice is literally shaking. The sermon says these aren't just grit your teeth willpower moments, it's the Spirit empowering you.
It links this to Jesus sending out the disciples too, right?
Yeah, John 20.21, as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. But again, the emphasis isn't on becoming superheroes. It's about being humble, faithful, loving people who act with a strength beyond their own.
Okay, different kind of power. Humble, faithful power. That makes sense. What's the fifth and final movement?
The last one is peace. The Spirit brings peace.
And this ties into Jesus' words in John 14.27.
Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. Don't be troubled or afraid. That's the one.
But what kind of peace? Because life is often chaotic. The sermon addresses that, right?
It does. It defines this peace very specifically. It's not the absence of chaos or problems.
Okay, so what is it then?
The sermon calls it the presence of God in the middle of it. Peace amidst the storm, not necessarily after it stops. And that kind of deep down peace, it says, is the Spirit's work.
Presence in the middle of it. That really lands differently.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it even suggests a practical exercise, connecting back to the breath idea. Just taking a deep breath, inhaling God's peace, exhaling fear, letting that divine breath, that Spirit kind of become the rhythm of your own body. It makes it very immediate.
Bringing it right into the physical. Okay, so we have these 5 movements: gift, presence, reminder, empowerment, peace. How does the sermon sort of wrap all this up?
It uses a really great closing analogy. It compares living by the Spirit to sailing versus motorboating.
Sailing versus motorboating. Okay, explain that.
Well, think about a motorboat. It just plows through the water, right? Relies entirely on its own engine, its own power. It pretty much ignores the wind, just pushes ahead.
Okay, I can picture that. Self-reliant.
Right. But a sailboat,
Totally different.
completely different. A sailboat has to be sensitive to the wind. It listens, adjusts its sails. It can only really move when the wind moves it. It has to trust that unseen force.
So the sermon is saying, be a sailboat.
That's the invitation, to live like a sailboat, to notice the wind, the Spirit's movement, maybe wait sometimes, lift our sails in expectation, catch God's breath and let it carry us.
It really circles back to that initial image of the wind's effects.
It does. It invites you again to breathe deeply, remember who sustains you, feel the Spirit's presence, maybe like feeling the wind on your face, and find strength from above when you're tired.
Yeah, and there's that line about how to answer if someone asks about the wind in your life.
Yeah, sort of a playful but profound suggestion. If someone asks, what kind of wind is blowing through your life these days? Maybe you can say, oh, that's the Spirit. Just acknowledging that unseen reality.
That's a memorable way to put it. It really sticks.
Yeah.
Now, as we kind of wind down this deep dives, the source itself included some questions for reflection. Maybe we can share those for you, the listener, to think about.
Good idea. The first one goes back to the beginning, the Spirit as wind, known by its effects. Where have you maybe sensed the Spirit working in your own life? What were those visible effects, those signs that made you aware of that presence?
Yes, specific moments maybe.
Yeah.
And second, that sailboat versus motorboat analogy. Where in your life right now do you feel like you're trying to just motorboat through, relying only on your own strength?
Mm-hmm. And conversely, what might it look like to be more like a sailboat in that area? Even a small adjustment towards being more sensitive, more responsive to the Spirit's leading.
That's a challenging one.
And finally, Finally, thinking about those 5 movements: gift, presence, reminder, empowerment, peace. Is there one of those that you feel you particularly need right now?
Like which one resonates most deeply with your current situation?
Exactly. And then how might you consciously try to open yourself up more to that specific work of the Spirit in the days ahead?
So we've really unpacked this sermon, When the Wind Speaks, that central metaphor of the Spirit as wind, invisible, powerful, known by its impact.
Yeah, and seeing the Spirit presented as this universal gift, this constant companion living with and in us, reminding us of Jesus, giving us strength when we're weak, and bringing that unique peace into the chaos.
And that final challenge, that sailboat image, are we relying on our own engine, or are we learning to adjust our sails to catch the wind? It definitely gives you a lot to think about regarding, well, reliance and presence.
It really does. So maybe here's a final thought to take with you this week. What might change if you intentionally paused, even for a moment, to try and feel the wind, both literally the air around you and figuratively sensing for that quiet, guiding presence? How might that shift your perspective on where your strength, your peace, your direction really comes from?